And as always, we're going to be looking for accurate context, good risk management, and always exercising good patience.
Anytime you're talking about fundamentals in a market and direction, fundamentals take a little bit of time to play out.
We got crude oil today, kind of trading yesterday's value area really nicely, low to high.
That's what we're here for, is to put ourselves in the best success. A trading routine does that, builds that habit, lets you know what to work on, what to reflect on, and what to improve on the next day.
Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to Coach's Playbook on Tuesday, September 14th. I'm Jack Pelzer, joined by John Hoagland and Dan. Mick has been unavoidably detained somewhere, but we'll promise that he will be back sometime soon. Today, we are talking about maybe something that's not the most glamorous side of trading, but something that we all go through. And I'm not talking about any medical condition. I'm talking about acting sort of like a trading idiot, more or less. We're going to kind of do like a summer recap, but also talk about some of the boneheaded mistakes we've made along the way and what you can do to avoid those going forward. Before we go anywhere, we got a big trader shout out. Dan?
Hoag's got it.
Oh, all right. Well, we've got some guys up some money today, but a real standout from yesterday is Kirill Shakarov, who was up about $9,000 yesterday. I think he was trading the NASDAQ. So that's one heck of a nice day.
Yeah, that's no joke right there. So great job to Kirill, and apologize if I have butchered your name, because that's something I am wont to do from time to time. So I guess we could broaden this out further than even the summer, because we kind of talked about it this past week. As everybody knows out there, even the best traders in the world, there's only so high of a hit rate you get on trades, right? If you're doing 60% winners, man, you are golden, especially the way we talk about asymmetric risk. But that means 40% are losers. There goes my headphone. 40% are losers, 10% are probably pretty bad losers. And then today we kind of wanted to talk about that tail of the distribution, the 1% of trades that, man, you really wish you hadn't made. And I think I'd be fascinated maybe in talking to Hoag about this first, because you've been around the block a few times.
Well, yeah, but I've never made any mistakes.
I forgot about that. I had that in my notes.
Yes.
Mr. Perfect.
So my apologies. What's the least good trades you've made?
Oh, man. I've always, since the beginning, been a pretty tight risk manager. I came from a long line of tight risk managers. My dad was in the industry. My dad was in the industry. Even though, at first I didn't really buy in that you've really got to learn how to take a loss. It didn't take too long for me to figure that out. I would say some of my bigger mistakes were in trades that were really good that I gave away. I remember standing in the S&P pit and just standing there with one hand up, and that means you can take on 1 to 6 contracts. And when broker hit me on a 5 lot, he just said buy 5, and he turned around, and I was trying to say I only wanted 1. I'd never traded 5 at big S&Ps before. So I, was instantly overcome with fear that I was going to, lose everything. And I couldn't even write it down. I was shaking so much. Well, as the trade started to kind of play out, there were, of course, always locals around you that were willing to take some of that trade for you, especially if it was a winner. So yep. So I said 1, 1, 1, 1. So I had 1 left, and then I could calm down enough to write down all the trades. But it turned out to be, a really good trade. And, I made some friends, but I don't think they were willing to help me like that the next time.
I think something important, and I don't know if we've ever talked about this, but everybody will everybody that I know, and maybe someone out there is perfect and hasn't done it. Every single person will do something stupid with an order at some point. You'll flip a ticket. Like it's something that you don't. And if you're not familiar with the lingo, even on the screens, well, it's even easier to do. Really, flipping a ticket is when you hit the bid instead of lifting the offer, or vice versa, right? And it seems like an incredibly dumb thing to do, and it is. But here's the thing: you start trading, and you're making hundreds and hundreds of trades, fast markets over the course of it. It's gonna happen at some point. So don't feel bad about yourself. It sucks. Don't try and make it a habit of doing, but be deliberate when you're putting in those orders. That's probably like the simplest level of making mistakes. And yes, I've flipped tickets in spread trades too, which is an unholy disaster because you're really flipping two trades there.
Yep.
Dan, you want to kick off, and then I'll go into my tales of woe.
Yeah, I mean, I probably could go on for days about some of the bonehead moves I've done. I mean, I can tell you one of the first trades I ever put on, it wasn't my own. It was, I was hedging, and I was working a 10 lot, a couple ticks off the offer, and I'm on the headset and they're telling, just fill them, just fill them, just fill them. And I'm thinking, well, if I'm filling them, why not try and save a couple ticks? And it's a 10 lot in the bonds. And well, if you remember in the pits, the bond pit was elevated and there was a big rail you can grab on and you could shoot out. My dad's kind of a stocky guy, short, hockey player. So, you know, quality build of a man. And he swings out of the pit and he comes trucking at me, screaming, fill the bleepity bleeps. Well, I finally got the fill. I made us a few grand working the order. And I was like on cloud nine. I was like 15 or 16 years old. I didn't really know exactly what I was doing. I didn't realize what exactly I had on the line. So my job was to hedge. So that was one of my first mistakes on my first ever trades. But then as I started trading on my own, I think some of my biggest mistakes, I have a couple that I can look back at. I had one of my first biggest 5-figure days I had ever seen, and I was jazzed up. And the risk manager at the time looked at me and said, Dan, why don't you get out of here? Someone will just, you know, flatten your position, get your position flat, at least get delta neutral so you can walk on out of here and get out of here early. And at first I was like, yeah, sounds good. Well, then I start seeing orders coming in and I was like, well, I'm going to hop in on a couple of these. Like, why not? You know, I'll take more. And I turned a beautiful, nice, big 5-figure day into I think I ended up walking away with about $1,200 on the day, which $1,200 is fine. But when you're trading in a firm and you've got big desk fees and you have big shoes to fill and a lot of expenses, $1,200 doesn't really go very far on a day. I think that was like less than my daily costs to trade.
Especially when the boss is telling you, you should go away now.
So yeah. I got in a lot of trouble for that one. I got put on a couple of days. I was told to go home and sleep that one off for a few days.
In the penalty box. Dan, when we come back to you later, though, we're going to have to hear a trade where you actually lost some money on this, because those are the those are the real fun ones.
That's my next one. But we can circle back.
All right, I'll circle back and start this off. First, I want to say, whenever you feel bad about flipping a ticket, I've seen one person at some point in my career who was a night clerk who proceeded to keep on, like, not noticing what was going on, kept on flipping a spread near the market open, and ended up just chucking $27,000 of pure loss through the market. And I was glad that I was not there that night, so that I did not have to call or hear the trader that he was working for when that went down. But those are like the simpler errors. I think Dan's story about being up and then going back down after they told him to get flat, those are the things we can learn from, which is what I want to talk about here. When I think about some of the biggest mistakes that I've made, where I've lost the most money needlessly, it's always through stubbornness. It's not as much the FOMO that gets me into the FOMO will get you into a little bit of trouble, I've found, or at least for me, but stubbornness of defending a position, believing in it for no particular reason besides that it should eventually work, is where I have gotten completely shredded. So I always try and think, you know, at those points, I wish if I was who I was now back then, because I'm talking about someone who's 25 years old or something like that, is I would say there's nothing wrong with, you know, dumping half a position or something, having a size on that's comfortable and not just completely compounding your misery. So that's something that I've noticed. And I'm sure, Hogue, is that something that's you ever get stubborn with the trade, or have you always just been the Zen master?
Oh no, I'm not the Zen master. I've had my share of issues like that, and many things that I've tried to impart to people that I work with is, you know, if you buy them at 8 and they're now trading 6, you know, you bought them at 8, you'll like them at 6, and you'll also like them at 4. And now that they're trading 2, you're going to try and average your average entry level in so that you can maybe get out of it if the market gives you a chance. And then when it goes down through even and you're absolutely sweating and just screaming to get out of the trade, who hasn't done that? That's, you know, that's just adding to a losing trade. But I think it's something, no matter how often you get told not to do that, it's something you have to try, because you think maybe you're going to get away with it that one time. This one time I'll get away with it. I'll get away with it. But you know, I've done it. I've stood next to people in the pit that absolutely destroyed themselves and by doing that. And you know, you know, you got to know when you're wrong, and you got to take it. You got to get out. You don't fall in love. Don't average in thinking that you're going to move your average price to a point where you're going to get the chance to get out, because there's always that one time that it's not going to give that to you. And it seems as though more often than not, it's 99 times out of 100 that you're not going to get it.
And you will. Yeah, you will get away with it one time. And that's
One
sometimes
time.
the worst thing that can happen, because especially if that's something that happens earlier in your career, one of your like early trades, you do something boneheaded, but it works out in your favor. You feel invincible.
You never forget it.
Yeah, you think you're, you know, Denzel, but you're not, and it'll bite you twice as hard the next time. I look back and I always think that, man, I wish I still have struggle with this now, that I'd been doing more, adding to trades that were in my favor that I liked, as opposed to getting out of those early and then defending trades that were against me. Another big thing that sort of happened towards the end of my career, when I switched firms to a much bigger firm, psychologically, what Dan talked about earlier about working for a firm, suddenly I went from working for myself, where I had my own account, to pooling accounts with a group, right? And it's sort of like how I find tennis doubles harder to play than singles, because I can accept bad things that happen to me, but when I'm hurting other people, that gets in my head. And naturally, they wanted everyone to trade bigger, and bigger than I was probably comfortable with. So I started holding on to some strategies that were stubborn, as I described before. I had a huge, like, I can't even remember the trade that like essentially meant time was up there. I was either short or long a lot of curve in the treasury yields. Like honestly, it doesn't matter. The point is I shouldn't have been in it. And I just felt like it had to work out. Like we talked last week about the O'Hare trade. This wasn't that. I'm still someone that was good about risk management stuff, but it destroyed essentially a whole year for me of just trying to swing too much and not trading comfortably. Now, did you guys ever feel that? Because you guys both worked at firms, but I haven't talked to you, Ho, as much about this. But how were your accounts set up? Were they pooled among a number of traders, or were you just strictly eating what you killed?
Just eating what we killed. The proprietary trading firm that I worked for, it was a sub account of their account, but I wasn't splitting profits with anybody.
That's what it was like for the first 6 or 7 years at the old place I was. But Dan, it sounds like you guys might have pooled some stuff, or
yeah, we were pooled for the most part, but you were percentage based. There were certain guys that, they're doing well into the 7 figures within 4 or 5 months into the year. I'm not getting near the percentage of a guy like that. But yeah, we were pooled. You got certain percentage based off of what you were putting in, based off of the last year. There was a whole algorithm and how they did it. And honestly, I grew to enjoy that idea a lot more, because then I had, like, when I was screwing up or someone else was screwing up, you had that accountability that someone was watching. We all had it on our screens. You're sitting there with 8 screens up. One of the corners had everyone's running P&Ls going. And if you saw some guy just keep bearing himself, whether it was you or the guy next to you, you'd crack him or he'd crack you, and get your shit together and get out of here. Stop for what you're doing. Like, stop what you're doing. What are you looking at? Once I'm out of my position, I'll help you out, or vice versa. But Jack, you mentioned the stubbornness, and that was when I went from prop to myself. This was a few years ago. I had been pretty good on control of my risk, and any down day, it was pretty limited on where I was going to stop. And we had a big move one day, and it was going against. So I was like, well, I can't lose on a big moving day. Like, that's my thought process was going on. I'm like, I'm not taking a loss on a loser. Or on a big move. And so I start I'm adding into losers, and I have historically had some good luck adding to losers. I have had good luck at it. I know it is a cardinal sin not to do it. But I've had some good luck at it. So I'm adding to losers.
It works until it doesn't.
And it keeps going against, and it kept going against, and it kept going against. And this was all of a sudden, I'm looking at P&L, I'm recognizing where I'm at, and I'm like, oh crap, this is my money. This is no one else's, but this is mine. Like, what are you doing right now, Dan? And it kept going, and it kept going. And I was like, I don't want to realize that loss. Like, I'm going to have to reseed this account a little bit with this loss I'm taking. And it kept going, and it kept going. Finally, I took my loss. It came back a little bit, but man, I'm not going to say the number, but it hurt. I lost about 3 or 4 months worth of profits on that day. And
Yikes.
I didn't trade for 6 months after that.
Absolutely. And the difference is, when you're trading for a firm, it's sort of, and I think this is why we get, when you look at the financial crisis, you get into all this moral hazard stuff. But like, when you're trading at a firm, realistically, unless you're doing something illegal, which hopefully no one out there is doing that, viewers.
Yep.
But the worst that could happen is you can get fired, right? You're not, unless you're the owner of the firm or something, you're not going to get margin calls.
There are some legal precedences that can be set within your contract. So if you sign with the firm and you deviate from what you're supposed to do, you can be held accountable by that firm.
Well, yeah, if you go
I do know a few guys. I know a few guys that are can't get hired right now because they've got other firms leaning against them, because they owe them some money based off of what they've done.
I know a few of those along the way, but honestly, always new headphones are falling out.
We're gonna have to get you the replacement things, Jack.
So I'm gonna hold it like this for now, like I'm okay. Yeah, but in those cases, all the people I know that have done that, they were violating their risk parameters, right? So that's what you always got to be accountable to your risk parameters, right?
Right. And part of your contract too, when you're with the firm, is they're telling you how far out you're allowed to trade, how long you can carry positions, like what your carrying risk is allowed to be. You've got a very long list of very specific things when you sign up with a new firm, and
they have you hold a lot of collateral in the firm, because it really is a lot of this is getting ridiculous.
We should change the title to "How long can Jack's headphones stay?"
My ears are like shaped weird. I don't know.
It's the little rubber piece on the AirPod Pros. We'll get you the link for the replacements for those, and you'll be set.
Thank you, Dan. One more thing that I want to talk about that I think applies to everyone, since we got a little bit on the firm track right there and go back to retail, is that not only can you be stubborn in a trade, such as like trade management type stuff, But you can get stubborn with a strategy, because everything in trading, your strategy will never last forever. Everything always gets weeded out. And sometimes it takes a lot of discipline and lack of stubbornness not to keep on trying the stuff that doesn't work. And I think we're way far enough past NDAs now. I can give an example that people maybe will understand. People sometimes shocked that like at big trading firms or like other things in the past, sometimes surprisingly simple things that you wouldn't think possibly work for a while. And so for a long time, are you guys familiar with like the CME implied spreads?
Mm-hmm.
So for everyone out there, CME offers these products called implied spreads. I'm sure they have them in other things, but I'm familiar with them in treasuries, right? Where you can basically get a guaranteed fill, and they take a little bit of edge, and you'll get like some ratio of different treasury contracts that you're buying or selling, essentially a piece of curve. And what we figured out was that on a number like unemployment, you could just stack the book way off the market of implied spreads on both sides and basically let it run through the number. Don't do this. It's against the Top Step rules too. Plus, remember, these weren't outrights. Like, so the reason, so it would just be like 1 second and it would go woof, woof. And if you got the fills, they were all guaranteed pieces of curve. So the worst that would happen is you'd end up with a little extra curve and you could puke it if it was a problem. Yeah. But sometimes you would just end up with tons of money in your account in like 2 seconds. Now, people started to get wise to this rather quickly. And within a year, within a year, you were just getting hammered if you did that. But a lot of people were still trying to do it because there's that, nostalgia, that hit that like, this used to work, it should work now. You always got to be looking, refining. The next trade is what makes you a good trader. Like what you've done in the past only matters so much. So don't get stubborn with some strategy you're using, right? If it's working, keep on working it. Build up your size, trade bigger responsibly if it's working. But if it's not working, cut the size and eventually cut it to zero if it's not working anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
It's all based on market state. If you're used to trading one market state and something's working for you, keep doing it. But I think one of the more difficult parts is it strips your gears when all of a sudden things like that just stop working because there's a difference in the market state. And, failing to recognize that is a fatal mistake in some cases. Eventually you're going to figure it out, but hopefully before you're broke.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't let yourself go broke. That's what you always keep your dry powder. I mean, and it's terrifying. Like it's frankly, part of the reason I left probably the main reason I left the industry professionally, like left the prop shop world, was that I was exhausted I was exhausted in general, but the idea of completely starting over and formulating new strategies for what we were doing just seemed completely daunting and not something that fit into my life at the time. Like now I've gotten back into trading some stuff on my own time, which is nice. But that's what kept me from kind of staying in that field. So that's my thoughts on that, I guess. Anyone have anything else they want to say about dumb things you've done?
Well, one thing I wanted to add, news is coming out. The CME is closing or delisting the SPOOs, the bigs, the big S&Ps, John's old pit. So maybe we'll have to have some cake for that one.
Yeah.
About time. What's the nominal value of that now? It would be like,
well, it's
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. How many times the index is it?
250.
Jeez. 250 times.
Yeah.
Let me do some math in my head. So it's
Minis
worth
are
over $1 million.
times. Oh yeah. Yeah. So if we're let's say 4,400 is the price for the S&Ps times 250. The nominal is $1.1 million.
Yeah. Well, get prepared for the CME to introduce the nano contracts.
Yeah, no, we're just going to keep going smaller and smaller.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that's probably a good place to leave for now. And Dan, I didn't ask before if you had a quote for this, so I don't want to put you
I
on the
do.
spot. All
I
right.
do.
Perfect.
College football legendary coach Bear Bryant says, when you make a mistake, there are only three things you should ever do about it: admit it, learn from it, and don't repeat it. I think my favorite part about that whole thing is just admitting it, recognizing you made a mistake. That's the first step. You got to admit you made the mistake first before you can do anything beyond that.
Yeah. There's people out there who will blame everything and everyone except themselves when it comes to a mistake. And that is not a great way to go about your life. Nobody likes someone that doesn't take blame on anything. And you're never going to grow unless you take blame.
That's just
Don't be too hard on yourself. That's just trading.
Right.
Don't be hard on
That's just
yourself, but
trading.
recognize.
There's only one person to blame in the whole thing. You can't sit there and blame your system. You can't always blame your strategy. You can't blame your platform or the batteries in the mouse are dead. That's all on you. You got to own it, accept it, and learn from it.
I think, gentlemen, it all comes down to humility. This is not our environment. We are in the market's environment. Anything we choose to do is on us. The only thing we can control is risk. The rest is up to the markets.
That's a good place to leave it. So we'll see you next week, maybe with some happier stuff we've done. But I find some good stuff comes, some good learning comes from making mistakes. So go out there and make mistakes, but not too many, and learn from them. And we'll see you next week.
And don't forget, join us tomorrow at 3 p.m. for the founder Q&A.
Oh yeah, MP can talk about all his mistakes, of which there are many.